What's up, everyone? Welcome back to more Reddit stories about entitled people, insane people, and all that kind of stuff. And as usual, we'll be checking out some more Reddit posts. So be sure to share your thoughts about today's stories down in the comments, and we're getting right into it. Leasing company sealed living squirrels in my walls. What do I do? I live in Minneapolis, Minnesota. I put in a maintenance ticket back in January to have holes sealed up at the edge of my roof where squirrels had gotten in, and I could hear them chewing at the wood in the walls on a regular basis. Month after month, I would contact the leasing company for my house any way I could to ask when this was going to get resolved. Yesterday, they finally came out with a crane and did this metalwork and expanding foam job, cutting down my little library to reach it. I thanked them for finally relieving me from the sounds of squirrels chewing apart the insides of the house I'm living in. Unfortunately, about 2 hours later, I hear the same chewing sounds I've heard for months, but this time it was obvious that the squirrels were trapped inside my house and trying to get out. The picture I've attached is one of the squirrels' arms struggling through a tiny opening in the metalwork. I've created multiple maintenance tickets of high importance both yesterday and today, today's being listed as an emergency. I tried calling their office and got a voicemail. And after hours, I tried calling them and selected I had an emergency maintenance request, but each time it rings a few times and then automatically hangs up on me. I try to leave a voicemail and it just says their voicemail box is full. I don't know what to do. I can't get a hold of anyone at the leasing company. The roof is 3 stories up, and those squirrels have probably 18 hours max before they die of dehydration, at which point my heart will break and I'll have multiple animals rotting in my walls. Like a horror novel, I can hear them just scratching and chewing, desperately trying to get out of what has been their home for months and has become their crypt. What do I do? Who do I contact? My current only plan is to get up as early as possible and drive to their headquarters and hope that someone's actually there. Sometimes there's just no one at the office in the middle of the week. I'm just listening to animals dying in my walls, and the people who sealed them in there have made themselves unreachable. When I contacted animal control, they let me know that unfortunately they aren't allowed to destroy property without permission of the homeowner, which is not me. Really wonderful lady. She expressed her sympathy for my situation. And 3 days later, OP posted an update. The squirrels have all been freed. After hearing about my dilemma, my sister and her partner, both strong animal lovers with animal rescue experience, drove all the way down from the Duluth area to give me a hand with my situation. While on their way down, they talked me into pulling the trigger on rescue efforts, and I made a few choice holes in my walls to try and tap into the squirrels' pathways. I turned off all my lights and closed up all my windows except for one, which I pulled the screen out of so that any squirrel coming out of the wall would see that as their way out. Within half an hour, I heard a squirrel come closer and saw its head pop out. Holding perfectly still, I started recording as the abrupt guest checked out my room, and eventually found the open window and escaped. While it was looking around, a second squirrel had popped out of the wall, but this squirrel was much more wary of me. He checked things out but jumped back into the wall when I moved my head, thinking a squirrel was actually coming in from the outside across the room. The second squirrel made another appearance a bit later, drank some of the water I left out, looked me right in the eyes for about a minute and a half, and then noped right back into the wall. It was around this time I set up a little web camera I fashioned out of an old cell phone, so I could keep an eye on things without needing to be in the room. The squirrel must have decided to go to sleep, which was around the time my sister and her partner arrived with pizza. During the night, I had a travel mug jammed into the wall, so I didn't wake up to a squirrel on my face. However, starting at 2 a.m. and every few hours after, I would hear the squirrel start plinking away at the bottom of the travel mug. At 6 a.m., when there was some light out, I opened up the window closest to the hole and pulled out the travel mug. 5 minutes later, squirrel number 2 jumped out through my window to freedom. I was ecstatic, until I realized I could hear a bit of scratching at the other end of the house. Apparently, the 2 fascias weren't connected by squirrel pathways, so there was a third squirrel still trapped. With my sister's advice, our crew ended up duct taping a hammer to the end of a broom handle, Tears of the Kingdom style, and her partner was able to pry open a section of the roof enough for the third squirrel to get out by leaning out the third-story window. An unbelievable and insane 48 hours. Today I effed up by accidentally triggering a police response at 3:30 a.m. after leaving the hospital 6 hours earlier. This happened last night. I had some chest pain that was persisting, so I went to the ER just to play it safe. They did an EKG, drew blood, and left a small IV in my arm in case they needed it later. By the time I got back to the waiting room, there were twice as many people and barely any seats left. I'd already been there about an hour and a half, and after another hour, my results started showing up in the patient portal. Everything looked good, just like I expected. I knew I probably should have waited for them to take it out, but the staff were swamped. I was starting to feel better, and honestly, I just wanted to get home and in bed at a reasonable hour. Once I got home, I removed it safely with no issues. Fast forward to 3:30 in the morning. My dog suddenly starts barking like crazy. I'm lying in bed half asleep when I start hearing low voices outside, and I see flashes of light from a flashlight hitting my bedroom wall. So I get up to check it out, and there are multiple people at my front door, and one guy actually peering through a window with a flashlight from the backyard. There were 4 cops, EMTs, and even an ambulance outside. No one knocked. Does anyone know if that's standard procedure? For a second, I honestly thought someone close to me had tragically died or something. When I opened the door, they said the hospital had called because I had left with the IV still in. This was 6 hours later. I had already removed it safely hours earlier, and what's strange is that the doctor had actually called about an hour and 45 minutes before the police showed up, leaving a voicemail that said all my results were normal and that if I needed anything, they were there. So if there had been an actual concern, I can't figure out why the police were even called that far afterward. Everything's fine. But apparently, I triggered a full-blown late-night emergency response over a tiny IV that wasn't even hooked up to anything. My teenage daughter thinks the whole thing is hilarious at least, but now I know not to do this again in the future. And a few people in the comments do actually explain the most likely reason why the hospital sent the cops out like this. A commenter says, you can leave the ER without being seen, but you need to tell the nurses you're voluntarily choosing not to be seen. They just mark it down and you're free to go. Typically, they would have someone come remove the IV tip pretty quickly once you choose to leave. And this guy says, worked security at a hospital in Florida for 9 years. When a person left AMA with an IV in, the concern was the patient was going to use the IV for drug use. This is really concerning to healthcare staff because they care. In earlier years, we would notify the sheriff's department to do a welfare check. Don't know if they ever did. Later on, legal said the IV was now their property and they can do with it how they please. We could not forcibly remove it. We just let them go with no call to the sheriff. This didn't stop healthcare from chasing after their patients who tried to leave with their IV. We had to explain multiple times. Some months ago, I actually did have a patient who left AMA with an IV, and he admitted his intention was to use the port for drug use. I wished him well and that he was in a better place someday. Entitled cousin ruined his life after a family reunion. I'm a 31-year-old male. My cousin, 30 male, who I will call Jake, has always considered himself the favorite of all the grandkids because of how our grandparents would always do stuff specifically with him. The real reason why they, quote, only spend time with him is because he lives 5 minutes from them, whereas the rest of us live in different states, me being the furthest at a 13-hour car ride. None of us know where this entitlement comes from. Even Jake's parents have called him out on his behavior, but it doesn't change. So to the story, my grandma passed away 10 years ago, and my grandpa is getting up in age, 92, but still amazingly healthy despite it all. My dad, aunts, and uncles were having some discussions with him leading up to the summer family reunion regarding future funeral costs, making sure his will was up to date, insurance, etc. We get to the reunion this past August and all is going well, until Jake starts to make a comment about how he's totally getting the house and grandpa's refurbished cars. My grandpa rebuilds old cars with my uncle, Jake's dad. We all ignore him like usual, which seems to upset him. So he decides to prove it to us and asks Grandpa directly about the will. Grandpa gathers all 9 of the grandkids together and tells us that his major assets, house and cars, will be sold and divided equally among all of us grandkids. Jake lost his crap because, despite years of being told that he loves all of his grandchildren equally, he still believed he was the favorite and would therefore get most everything from the inheritance. It got even worse when he realized that this included our step-cousin Erin, 25 female, who despite being in the family since she was 12, quote, wasn't even a real grandkid. TLDR, this devolved into literally the entire family ganging up on Jake, hurling all kinds of insults at him for the things he said. The reason I'm writing about this now is that I just got off the phone with another of my cousins an hour ago, who told me that Jake was arrested last night for trying to steal one of our grandpa's cars. But since he never once actually helped with those things, the idiot tried to steal one that didn't even work yet. So from what I've heard, Jake is currently sitting in a jail cell with his parents refusing to bail him out. And my grandpa has a meeting with his attorney on Thursday to remove Jake from the will. All items on the floor are trash. Have fun rooting through the dumpster. I'm a custodian for an office building. I clean bathrooms, take out trash, vacuum, etc. I clean in the morning before the office opens. When collecting trash, I'd occasionally find some loose papers under or behind desks, beside the trash can or otherwise on the floor. Since I'm not sure if these papers are trash that missed the can or important documents that fell on the floor by accident, I pick them up and put them on the corner of the nearest desk for the workers to either file them away or toss them. Better safe than sorry. However, the manager did not like this habit. She came in early one morning expressing disgust that trash is being placed on people's desks. Obviously, I never put actual trash like food wrappers or crumpled papers on desks. I explained my reasoning for my habit and expressed that I didn't want to risk tossing something important. My manager told me that everything on the floor is trash, and the workers aren't such immature slobs to drop important documents on the floor. I agreed and said I'd never do it again. Flash forward several weeks. My manager came in early again and expressed concerns because a filing cabinet had tipped over the day before, and despite picking up the papers, they were still missing a few important documents. She asked if I'd seen them. I reminded her that since everything on the floor is trash, the documents were probably thrown away. She was irate, saying, "But this was an exception since a filing cabinet fell over." I asked her how I was supposed to know that when I'm not there during the day and was otherwise not informed to look out for these documents. That's when the situation dawned in this woman's eyes that she was at fault. She stumbled through some excuses before demanding I go to the dumpster and find the papers. I told her that the office was opening in 15 minutes and I still had work to do. She stormed off and said she'd start looking in the dumpster. While I cleaned, I knew I'd face her again before leaving. My car is parked by the dumpster. So I thought of what to say to her as the final nail in the coffin. Sure enough, when I finished my work and walked out, the manager and a few other workers who arrived were rooting through the dumpster. When the manager spotted me, she demanded I come help. I delivered my prepared line. "Ma'am, my job description is to take out trash. Your job description is to ensure the safety and confidentiality of your client's files." I walked away to, in my head, a cartoon-esque villain scream of outraged failure from my manager. A few hours later, and I got a text saying there will now be a special inbox shelf for me to place any papers found on the floor for the workers to go through. Anyway, that's going to be all for today, guys. Thank you for watching. I appreciate it. Be sure to drop a like if you enjoyed and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already for more Reddit content like this. Take care, friends, and I'll see you next time.